surprising sushi, the breadbasket of Europe, and celebrating life in a war zone. This week, we're in Ukraine.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. On this show, we talk food and travel, two of the great joys of life. And this week, it's something different. We're talking with Rob Rose from Raw Travel about his summer in Ukraine. But first, since you like food and travel, you should check out destinationeatdrink.com. I'm constantly posting new stories and videos about food and travel. This week, I just posted a new video about the best tapas bars in Seville, Spain. You can see that by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com or by going to my YouTube channel at Destination Eat Drink 946. There's also a brand new foodie travel guide on the site, this one for the undiscovered Portuguese city of Viana do Castelo. Unique local pastries, vino verde, intricate gold jewelry, and more in Viana do Castelo. You can read about it at destinationeatdrink.com/Viana. That's VIANA. Rob Rose is the host and creator of the TV show Raw Travel. Last time he was in Lisbon, we met up and recorded an episode of the podcast, and Rob shared with me that it would be the last season of Raw Travel. But then the invasion of Ukraine happened, and Rob, who's done several episodes in Ukraine and loves the country and its people, decided to spend the summer there documenting what people are going through in a war zone. His 4-part series about Ukraine on Raw Travel debuts with part 1 this weekend. Check your local listings for when it airs in your city. This episode of Destination Eat Drink is unlike any other I've ever done. Rob talks candidly about life in Ukraine and how people are doing their best to live life even as bombs go off around them. He tells me about his videographer, Anastasia, who is Ukrainian, her father, who is fighting in the war right now, and whose battalion uses a truck bought using funds raised by Rob. And he tells me why Ukraine needs to stay front and center on the world conversation. We also talk food, like the sushi/pizza shops in Ukraine, a dish called vareniki, and pork fat on a cracker. And of course, some borscht, too. It's an amazing conversation with Rob. Enjoy.
Destination Eat Drink.
Rob Rose from Raw Travel. Welcome back to Destination Eat Drink. It's great to talk to you again. Man, you've had an exciting couple of years since we last had you on the show.
Yeah, that would be one word for it. Yeah, definitely. Interesting.
So you were in Lisbon a couple of years ago. You filmed a show, and it was very fun and lighthearted. And now, this past summer, you spent in the Ukraine documenting what's going on in Ukraine during this war. Tell us, what made you decide to go to Ukraine for the summer and film all this?
Well, I mean, the world has changed dramatically from the time when I was in Lisbon. We were just coming out of COVID, and I was all excited about, being able to travel again, and still am. But unfortunately, shortly thereafter, we had no time to really enjoy that before, Putin decided to do a full invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And I've been going to Ukraine since 2012. So, and then I went back twice to film in 2000. I went first in 2012 as a tourist traveler, just traveling through Central and Eastern Europe. And then I went again in 2019, ironically, twice, once in August and once in the winter. I had an opportunity to go back and I filmed. And so I filmed pretty in depth and met a lot of people on that one. And I saw the evolution of it becoming a country. Basically, it becoming, what was essentially a Russian satellite state in 2012 to people really reveling in their freedom in 2019. And even then, not knowing what the future held, I was so inspired by Ukraine. And I tell people it really made me appreciate democracy and even my own country as travel is wont to do when you go to places that don't have the freedoms we have in the United States. And so, I ended up working with Anastasia, who is a Ukrainian, young lady who's a very talented videographer. And I met her in 2019, and she at the time was a refugee, internally displaced refugee from the 2014 invasion that Putin did in eastern Ukraine and Crimea. She was from the Donbass region. She was in Kiev and started opening my eyes. And then on that same trip, when I met her, I'd also gone to Georgia, Russian occupied South Ossetia, and toured that area and just saw the occupying area, and basically toured that with a guy who had fought in the Georgian Russian war when Russia invaded Georgia in 2008. And that's when things just started to click, how Russia, the imperialistic nature of Russia, the history of oppression from Russia to its neighbors, its smaller neighbors, and in particular to Ukraine. And so it just started to click. And so Anastasia and I worked together in places like Portugal, Lithuania. Anytime I was in Europe, I would just hire her, and basically got to know her family really well. So when the invasion happened, her father was serving in the military. Her mother had to stay behind. She had to flee and go to Paris with her brother. So she was now externally displaced. And I felt a responsibility to tell the world what was happening in Ukraine. So I went in 2022 just for 4 days with Anastasia to Western Ukraine. And it wasn't enough, man. I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to come back. I want to go deeper. There are a few mitigating factors that why I couldn't go deeper. I caught COVID in France. So I committed myself in 2023 to going back and staying longer, going deeper into Ukraine. And that's what I did. And one of the most amazing trips of my life.
When you came to Portugal a little over 2 years ago and we met up in Lisbon, I remember because I had seen Anastasia on your show, like she makes brief appearances, and I think we missed her by a matter of hours or maybe by a day or two, because I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to see her as well. And we didn't see her. But ever since then, I've been interested and I've always asked you about her. So I'm going to ask you again, how's she doing and how's her family doing? Because I'm very interested and I feel like I'm invested in her well-being as well now.
Yeah, I mean, Anastasia is an amazing human being. And I think I like putting her on camera. I put, a lot of people on camera, videographers behind the scenes, because I want people to see the authentic and real version of putting together raw travel. But Anastasia has such an interesting story, and she's so sweet and nice, and it comes across on camera. She's young, and it just feels so unfair what she's been through, yet somehow she has this incredible sense of humor. And this is what I find in Ukraine with Ukrainians. And I'm happy to report she's back in Kiev with her little brother, doing well. I try to keep up with her as much as I can on social media. And her mother is a doctor. Her father is fighting. He fought in Bakhmut. We were able on our trip when we were in Kharkiv to reunite with him. She had not seen him since Bakhmut, where his troop battalion, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact phrases, but his battalion had suffered losses or casualties up to 50%, but he was okay. So I got to meet him. I got to ride in a truck that we had helped them, we had fundraised to help them get. And it was very fulfilling. And that's a very emotional part of the trip that'll be in the documentary I'm filming about it. And so as far as I know, she's doing good. I know her father was in the hospital, wasn't wound related. I think it was just health related, and he's out now. But I feel for him. I feel for all the soldiers on the front. I've gotten to know some of them, and just to live in these brutal conditions. I mean, I feel for everybody dealing with air raid sirens on a day-to-day basis, drones and missile attacks. I've heard audio whenever Putin was attacking Kiev, most recently after the U.S. government became mired in this stalemate about whether to continue to aid Ukraine, which I find incomprehensible and just so frustrating on so many levels. But that's when Putin steps up his attack. He senses weakness like a bully, and that's what he does. So he sent drones and missiles to Kiev in an unprecedented manner at that point in time. And Anastasia's cousin's apartment got bombed, and then she sent me some of the audio that they hear, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely, just the audio is terrifying. And obviously you can tell I get a little emotional about it because, I am worried about all my friends there in Ukraine, and not just will they make it through this unscathed physically, but what's the toll going to be like mentally, and all the children, and it's disturbing. And I always felt like with the United States fighting for democracy that we were in a good place, and I'm like, we're going to win, and I'm so distraught, so emotionally just bummed out on a daily basis. And I try not to let it get to me about the political situation where people who were so rah-rah Ukraine when this first happened are suddenly gone. Don't hear a peep. And I just don't understand. A child getting killed in Ukraine today is just as tragic as it was in February of 2022 when everybody's like, hey, like Ukraine, support Ukraine. It's just as tragic today. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is the attention span of the American people and the effect of Russian propaganda upon our political system, which is just tragic.
I wonder if the war now in Israel and Gaza has anything to do with that, because it seems to me that ever since that happened in October, that's occupying the so-called front page. There's not really newspapers anymore, but occupying news stories, the top news stories. And Ukraine almost seems to be an afterthought. Do you think we're in danger of not only not supporting Ukraine, but forgetting about it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is part and parcel of what happens when you allow someone like Putin to do what he did. It emboldens others to cause chaos, and it has a domino effect. So for those who think that this doesn't impact them because they live in the mighty United States of America or the European Union, you're so dead wrong. You're so dead wrong. This impacts you, and it will impact you on a very tangible basis if you don't wake up and pay attention. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, because, what is happening, with Israel and Hamas and in Palestine is brutal on such a degree that, it kind of makes what's happening in Ukraine look almost quaint. And the reality is terror is terror. Misery is misery. And a lot of people try to do some false equivocation there and say, well, if you're going to support Ukraine, you've got to support Palestine. And I'm like, well, you got to support humans, period. The right to life. The difference is Ukraine doesn't have a terrorist organization that went to Russia and made this attack. Ukraine is defending its territory because Russia attacked them. And this is nothing new. If you know the history of Russia and Ukraine, you know that. This is just part and parcel of what Russia does. And this is the danger of why letting a guy like Putin get this far, going back to when we, basically George Bush or actually Bill Clinton. This is what happens when you think a guy like this is someone you can trust, you can do business with, and you empower them. They make money and they put it into the military, and this is the end result. Chickens have come home to roost.
We've seen the videos on TV over the last 2 years of this horrible fighting and what's happening in Ukraine and the suffering. Before you went over there, you must have been wondering, what the heck am I going to see when I get there? Did it differ at all when you actually got on the ground, what your perception is to what you thought you'd see and what you actually saw?
Yeah, I would say more the feeling, because I was extremely anxious, like nervous, and because you don't know, right? And all you do is see the images on the news. And what I think occurs and it's not just my experience. I've talked to numerous folks who've been to Ukraine or going to Ukraine. I've been there numerous times, more than me. and in more gnarly areas, is the sense of calmness that you get. And that's because of Ukrainian stoic calmness as well. And surprisingly that you can have a good time. It touches an emotion deep inside that I can only describe as fulfilling, because you're part of something bigger than yourself. And you feel a part of these people in their fight. And that's something that I've never really felt in the United States that much. On occasion, perhaps there are certain causes here and there, but not particularly strong. And that's something you feel very tangible in Ukraine. And it's addictive, even when you're, under fire or fearful. There's some solidarity in that with the other folks. And, I'm not trying to paint a pleasant picture of it, but I am trying to say it's not misery 24/7. There's a lot of good things to counteract it. And, if you don't believe it, just ask why people keep going back. I've been to many places where I'm like, I'm glad I went. I don't think I'll probably go back unless there's like Haiti. I'm really glad I went. I loved it. I love the people there, but I'm probably not going to go back. It's rough travel. Well, Ukraine, rough travel. It's not easy to get in and out of a war zone, but I can't wait to go back, and I don't want to leave when I go. And that matches the experience of most people who go there. So it's kind of intangible, Brent. I can't really, put my finger on it, but it's a feeling that you get, and the anxiousness doesn't go away. But when I come back, there's definitely a down period. You're feeling kind of down. You miss it. You miss it.
I follow you on social media, and I saw all of these pictures that you posted while you were in Ukraine. And, you had plenty of pictures of massive destruction going on there, both human suffering and just stuff being destroyed and blown up, right?
Right.
But at the same time, you also were able to show people trying to live normal lives as best they can in the midst of all this war and chaos. Is that so? I think that's kind of the idea that you're trying to bring across. Do I have that right?
You have it 100% correct. And basically, it's just exactly how I experienced it. I mean, I want to show what I see. I want to call it like I see it, like I felt it, without, exaggerating anything. So yeah, there was some danger, a lot of destruction, but that's not all. There were many other things. And that's the part that I think surprises people. And I remember one guy saying, well, it looks like war is not that bad. And I'm like, oh, don't be misled.
Ah.
I could sit here and show you just the bad stuff if you want that. But, I don't think people want that. I think that's one reason people are fatigued. There's only so much bad news and chaos you can take it. I get that, man. I do get that. Because I have to avoid the news, man. You got to take care of your mental health first, but I don't think it behooves us to look away. And so by showing some of these more positive things, which again is just reality, it allows people to take in the negative in doses. And that's just what life is. It isn't all good and it isn't all bad. It's up and down. And somewhere in there, I guess, is some kind of lesson or purpose that we're supposed to have. But Ukraine kind of encapsulates that in a nutshell. Maybe that's why I like it so much, because it is, life writ large for me.
This is a food and travel show, and so I'm always interested in the food aspect, but, I'm closing in on 300 episodes of this podcast. I don't think I've ever talked about food in a war zone. And so my first question about food in a war zone is this: are people getting enough to eat? Because agriculture and distribution must have been disrupted in a major way at the start of this war, probably still is. So I'm wondering, how are they able to get food? Are people getting enough food?
That's a great question. So the quick answer is yes, lots of food. But if you're in an occupied territory by Russia, very possibly not. If you're in somewhere like Kherson that's getting shelled on a daily basis because you're so close to the front lines and you were previously occupied by Russia, recently liberated. Possibly not, because it's, there's not a lot of stores open. So that's where the humanitarian effort comes in. And it just so happened that, as far as the farmland, and yeah, it's been disrupted. I think 30% of Ukrainian territory or something like that is mined of Ukrainian farmland. But I was just amazed at how much farmland it is. I mean, I thought I knew, when you go through Iowa, you see a lot of farmland. And in Ukraine, you're just driving and driving and driving, and there's just like no buildings. It's just farmland after farmland. So I could see why they're the breadbasket of Europe. But it just so happened, coincidentally, when my trip was scheduled, it was right after the Russians exploded the Kakhovka Dam. I think that's how you pronounce it, and flooded, villages all around that dam, and displaced thousands, killed several people. Fired upon volunteers trying to help the people evacuate, fired upon them, tried to kill them, killed a couple of journalists. So those folks didn't have food. And so that, it just depends. If you're in that kind of area right there, then food insecurity is a real thing, and their gardens are ruined for life. Their homes are destroyed. And they're on the run. So we met a lot of refugees, and food is, of course, a big thing because they don't have money. Perhaps they just left with the, clothes on their back, and they're traumatized. So food is a big deal. And luckily there are, many humanitarian efforts going on. And then you have people like the World Central Kitchen, which is devoted to feeding people. And I can tell you the good work they're doing, because I've eaten their food. And you're just like, you're hungry, and there's World Central Kitchen, with the food there, and they do such important work. So I can't speak enough about those guys. One of the impacts of the dam flooding was we were afraid of eating seafood. We were like, we don't want to eat, because so much of the water had been contaminated. But you can really have some awesome seafood. And I was just shocked at the great sushi I had while I was there. I wasn't going to do it, because I was like, sushi and pizza. And all the times I've been to Ukraine, I don't think I've ever had sushi. And it's the only meat I eat, right? And it's like the one last thing for me to give up. And I was like, a sushi/pizza restaurant. They were all sushi pizza restaurants. And I was like, I don't know. That doesn't sound safe. And I'm like, there was just a dam blow up. The water could be contaminated. But Anastasia and I were in Kharkiv, and she wanted to have sushi. She has many great qualities, but she's kind of a picky eater. Sometimes. So I was like, yeah, great. You want to do it? Let's do it. I'll give it a go. And I figured she knew where to go. It was a pizza sushi spot. Some of the best sushi I've ever had. Ukrainians put their own spin on it. There's a lot of like cream cheese in there. But I'll tell you, those rolls were good, man. And that fish was fresh. And I forgot all about the contaminated water, man. It was really good. Unexpected treat. I think I had sushi every day for the rest of my trip after that.
Sushi pizza, that's so funny, because those are like two of the biggest things that you see as international exports. And in Ukraine, they're just like, let's do both of them, man.
Mash up the Japanese and the Italian. Yeah. I had some pizza too, and the pizza's good, but the sushi is just outstanding. And, food overall is really cheap. Ukraine's a very inexpensive destination pre-war, and it certainly is now, post-war.
Did you have any borscht while you were there?
Absolutely, man. My favorite story, 2012, I went into this restaurant, just to get some lunch, and couldn't read the menu. I think it's pre-Google Translate days. And, this very nice couple that owned the restaurant, I was like the only customer there because it was probably off hours, and I was probably eating on American, hours still. And they convinced me to try borscht. And I just don't like tomatoes or beets that much. At the time, I didn't like beets. And I was like, I don't want to be rude, man. Let me have some. It is their, dish, one of their national dishes. And bro, I fell in love with borscht at that point in time, Brent. And I've been a borscht fanatic ever since. But it's got to be Ukrainian borscht from Ukrainians. I'm not just going to go have some at any spot, because I've gotten spoiled and I've found out there's a lot of different types of borscht wherever you go, So, it's different in Kiev from Lviv, and depends on who's making it. So I consider myself a borscht fanatic now, and I love trying the different types of borscht.
You know, here in our city, we have some Ukrainian people here. We also have some Russian people who have left Russia because of the war. You know, and one Russian couple, I think they're originally from Azerbaijan, but they moved to Russia for their professional lives, and they left when the war broke out, and they came to our city and they opened a restaurant here. And a lot of it is their menu normally is Portuguese dishes to appeal to the Portuguese, but on the weekends they do a special menu of dishes from former Soviet republics, and you'll see Ukrainian dishes show up there. We went there one night when they had a special Georgian menu, and I got the the Georgian pizza with the cheese and the egg on top and the whole thing, and it's really quite special because it's expanding the culinary palette here in our town of Setúbal, and I'm so happy to see those guys here now, enjoying themselves. Another Russian couple, I just off the top of my head, they opened a craft beer place here, where they've got craft beer on tap. So, you've got people from Russia who are fleeing this war, who are landing in Portugal, and I for one am very, very happy to see them here.
Yeah, and I think that brings up, I had a lot of Georgian food in Ukraine as well. So Georgian food is, really getting expert. I haven't tried it yet. It looks kind of touristy. I'm in a kind of touristy area of New York. There's a Georgian restaurant that just opened up here. But I will tell you that, Veselka is the Ukrainian restaurant here in New York, down in the East Village. It's been around forever. It's a great spot. I've been there probably 4 times since I was in Ukraine this summer. And of all the years, and I even used to live near Veselka, I never went there before. So my palate has completely, and I think it's, for me, it's turning into comfort food because it reminds me of a time where I'm completely content. I feel there's just something warm and wonderful about it. And I tell my Latin American friends, Colombians in particular, and they don't understand the connection. I'm like, Ukraine and Colombia remind me of each other. They've been through hard times. The people are tough, extraordinarily friendly, especially the folks in Medellin. And, I get that from Ukraine. I mean, they're not huggy kissy when you first meet them. They're still stoic Slavs, but there's a friendliness there. And I'm like, there's a smile. You may have to wait for it, but it's coming. It might be at the end of the conversation. And you're like, but it warms your heart, man. And I had strangers come up and hug me just because we were there as Americans helping out or as volunteers, really. And that's we're American, helping out. And, it breaks my heart if we abandon those folks, with aid from the United States, because I don't think they can win the war. Without it, though, I wouldn't underestimate Ukrainians, but how many extra people are going to die. And I wonder if the politicians who are blocking this, I wonder how they sleep at night. Obviously, I guess that's a question we could ask anybody who gets in that business, because it is a business. But, yeah, it's just sad. But yeah, the food for me right now is comfort food. And I mean, borscht vareniki is another one, the dumplings, and it's kind of like pierogies in Poland. But again, it varies region by region. And so I love vareniki as well. And, it's surprisingly, you can be a vegetarian in Ukraine pretty easily, if you're just a little bit flexible. Vegetable borscht soup, for example, vareniki with potatoes. Of course, I mentioned I have a weakness for sushi. So, and then, there is a soup, a mushroom soup called kalatushi. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it's really good. It probably has a little milk in there and cream. It's kind of creamy. And then, but also they're always going to stuff some salo, which is like pork fat on a cracker, I think. It looks really unappetizing. But if you're doing any alcohol shots, I went to a birthday party like my second day in Ukraine. There was a buddy from New York who was there. He's from Lviv, and we had always talked about. He was my UPS driver, believe it or not. He would deliver my packages to my apartment, and I got to know him because of Ukraine. Because I heard the accent. I was like, "Where are you from?" And we talked about Ukraine. We're like, "We got to go." And I'll show you around Lviv. And anyway, he was there helping his family during the war. When I was there, he picks me up at the train station. I say he kidnapped me just because he basically took me out. I was like, bro, I just want to go to sleep. And he's like, no, we're going to my hometown. And he took me to this birthday party. And it was all these young Ukrainians. Like 3 of them spoke a little English. And my buddy Andrew spoke some English, of course. And it was just a spread like you would not believe. And the alcohol, I'm so sorry, I don't know the name of it, but they were, I think it's kind of like homemade alcohol. And I was doing shots of that, and they were stuffed in salo, and they could tell I can't pretend. I was like, I don't like the salo. It's not my thing. But this past New Year's Eve, I spent with some Ukrainians. It's a big holiday for them. And, they invited me, and I had some salo voluntarily. And I was like, uh-oh, are my tastes changing? I did not want to take it. So it's like they stuffed it down my throat. I didn't want to have it, but it's tradition. And I've eaten a lot of nasty things in my raw travel career. And now I'm like, I'm eating that voluntarily. I got to watch out there. And it's literally just like pork lard on a cracker to me. It's not great.
You mentioned being a vegetarian now, except for an occasional sushi. And I noticed from your pictures that you attended a vegetarian festival. Like they're not only celebrating life, but they're celebrating vegetarianism in the middle of this war. That's kind of incredible, right?
I tell you, it was just the coolest little festival. And that's the thing I love about Ukraine is their values match up so well with Western democracy. And, the young people in particular are so eager to be free. They don't want the corruption of their grandfathers and grandmothers and all that who grew up in the Soviet era. They want out of that. They want out from under Russia's thumb. And not that you can't find vegetarians in Russia. I'm sure you can, but maybe in Moscow or St. Petersburg. But they had this little festival, and here's what I was surprised. I mean, the food was outstanding, and I had one of the biggest, juiciest veggie burgers I've ever had. I interviewed a guy. I forgot his name, but he's a punk rock guy. That's originally how I was introduced to him, who, basically created vegetarian MREs, meals ready to eat.
Oh, wow.
For the guys at the front. So the guys at the front were, there were some vegetarian guys, and they didn't want to eat meat. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. They're sitting there dodging missiles, bullets, buried in a foxhole. And yet they're willing. I feel, such a wuss because, I'm like, I'm so easily off the vegetarian bandwagon. If I'm like, okay, well, I'll just have to eat meat today, because there's not choices or something. And here these guys were like, hey, can you make us some MREs that are vegetarian? And he sent me a couple back. They're called Lupti or something. I think I have them somewhere in my photos there. And I got to tell you, he sent me a couple of them coming back because the great thing is they can travel. They're good. They're fresh, until you open them. It was amazing. It was amazing. I really want to help these guys at the appropriate time. I'm hoping, this war will be over soon, of course. But when it is, to get that in the United States, because I've had a lot of vegetarian meals and meal kits and things like that because I'm not a great cook. And I'm a terrible cook. Let's just call it for what it is. And I eat out a lot, and I eat a lot. I only cook when I just get tired of eating out. And I was like, man, I could live off of this. And so, those MREs, that were vegetarian and just to me, just blew my mind that soldiers in the front, who are, literally fighting for their survival, living under extremely uncomfortable conditions, would still hold true to their vegetarian diet.
Rob Rose, I want to thank you for being on the show, but I really want to thank you for the work that you're doing, raising the profile of what's happening in Ukraine right now. Folks can watch your show, Raw Travel. It's syndicated all over the U.S., and they can go to your website. We've got a link in the show notes to find out where it airs in their town. But watch this. This is a 4-part series that you really shouldn't miss if you have any kind of interest in what's happening in the world, not just in Ukraine, but how it affects all of us. And thanks again for being on the show. It's always great to catch up with you. And this was a great, great conversation.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Brent. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about Ukraine and, in your way, by doing this and all the other people, big or small guys, doesn't matter if you just say support Ukraine. It means a lot and we appreciate it.
That's Rob Rose. What an insightful guy. It's just incredible talking to someone who was there in Ukraine and reports on it with no agenda. I've got links to Rob's website in the show notes, and the 4-part Summer in Ukraine series debuts with part 1 this weekend all over the United States. Check your local listings for when that airs in your city. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, it's breakfast tacos in Austin, vegan tacos in Los Angeles, and Korean tacos. All about tacos next week. And if you enjoy the show, please consider a one-time or continuing contribution to Destination Eat Drink. You can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Destination Eat Drink. And thank you very much. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.